In the cold, endless dark between the stars, a small cargo ship drifts slowly through the empty sea of space, its metal hull old and scratched from years of work, carrying goods from one far world to another. The crew inside moves about their duties with tired hands and quiet eyes, for in this region of space there is little joy and even less laughter. As they pass through a lonely sector near the edge of known maps, the ship glides past a dim red star, and the young deckhand named Laro looks out of the narrow window, his eyes wide with wonder and with fear, for he has heard stories about this place, stories told in shadows and whispers, stories about a certain blue world far away that even the bravest captains will not approach. He turns to the older crew sitting at the table in the mess hall and asks the question that has been burning inside his mind since the day he signed onto this ship. Why does no one attack Earth the moment the word leaves his mouth? The room falls silent, spoons freeze halfway to mouths, voices die mid-sentence, and eyes turn to him with something close to alarm. The eldest among them, a scarred alien named Dren, slowly sets his cup down and looks at the boy with a long, tired stare. Dren's skin is a pale gray, his eyes deep and unreadable, and his voice low. When he finally speaks, he says quietly and carefully, "You do not ask that question." Here Laro blinks, confused but curious, and says, "Why not?" Dren's gaze moves around the mess hall, as if checking the shadows and the corners for something unseen before he leans forward, his voice even lower than before, "Because those who try to challenge that world never return." The young deckhand frowns, trying to imagine what could make the mighty fleets of the galaxy turn away without a fight. He has seen battles in space. He has seen powerful empires crush whole planets and claim them as their own. But this Earth seems small, fragile, unimportant. So why would it be feared, he asks. Again, this time his voice softer, but full of interest. What happened? Dren's eyes do not leave him as he answers, "Once long ago, an empire far stronger than anything you can imagine came to take Earth. They thought it would be an easy prize. They thought the humans were soft and weak, but they were wrong." And the way he says wrong makes the hair rise on the back of Laro's neck. The room feels colder, as if the very air has grown heavy around them. The other crew members avoid looking at either of them, some pretending to eat, some staring at the table. As if lost in thought, Laro waits for Dren to go on, but the elder alien only shakes his head slowly. "You will hear the stories from others if you travel long enough," he says, "but each story is different, and none of them tell the whole truth. Some speak of a weapon hidden deep on that world, a weapon that can burn the stars themselves. Others say it is not a weapon at all, but the humans themselves, something in their nature that turns battles into nightmares that break the minds of their enemies. I do not know which is true, but I know this: no one who goes to fight them ever comes back alive." The silence after his words is thick and long, the hum of the ship's engines, the faint clatter of a dropped spoon, the slow drip of a leaking pipe somewhere above, all sound far too loud in the heavy stillness. Laro feels the weight of the moment pressing on him like deep water pressing on his chest, and yet his curiosity only grows. He wants to know more. He wants to understand what could make such fear take hold of whole empires, and he wonders if perhaps he will one day see this mysterious Earth with his own eyes. But for now the crew avoids his gaze, and the air in the mess hall feels tense, as if they have spoken of something dangerous, something that even the empty void around them is listening to. Far away from the small cargo ship where Laro listened to the whispers of the crew, the galaxy still carried the scars of an old war that few dared to speak about, for in the archives of many worlds there was a blank space where records should have been, and in the minds of those who lived through those years there were memories so dark and so heavy that they were locked away, never to be told except in low voices over quiet tables in places far from the ears of strangers. And this war had begun in a time when the Dravic Dominion was the strongest power in this part of the universe. Their fleets covered the stars, their colonies numbered in the thousands, and their rulers believed no world, no people, and no army could stand in their path. It was in this age of conquest that a scouting ship from the Dominion entered the Sol system, their sensors mapping the orbits of the planets, their eyes drawn to the third one from the sun, a blue and white sphere with green lands, and restless seas. The first reports described a young species with limited space travel, no colonies, no large fleets, no advanced weapons, their ships small and fragile compared to the massive war machines of the Dominion. The High Council of the Dravics saw this as a simple opportunity. Earth would be taken quickly, its resources claimed, and its people either made to serve or removed entirely. The Council declared the invasion would be a message to all other worlds that resistance was useless against the will of the Dominion. The invasion fleet was assembled over the Red Moon of worth 100 capital ships, each the size of cities, their armor thick and weapons strong enough to tear moons apart. They moved through the void in a dark wave lit by the glow of engines and the cold light of distant stars. As they passed through the outer edges of the Sol system, they destroyed the small human satellites. They detected the human forces, did not respond quickly, their old machines barely able to track the intruders, and the commanders of the fleet laughed at the weakness they saw ahead of them. Yet there was something strange, for as the fleet moved closer to Earth, the humans did not panic. There were no desperate messages broadcast across space, no surrender, no begging. Instead, the humans remained silent. Their few warships moved into defensive positions near the planet, but did not attack. The Dominion believed this was fear and weakness, yet some of the older officers felt uneasy, as if something was wrong. The first battle began in the shadow of the moon. The Dominion ships unleashed a storm of plasma fire and kinetic strikes. The human defenses were hit hard, but the planet itself remained untouched. The humans responded with weapons the Dominion thought primitive: metal projectiles, chemical explosives, railguns, and missiles. None of these should have been able to harm the armor of the Dominion vessels. Yet one by one the invaders began to lose ships. It started with small explosions in the outer fleets, then larger blasts that ripped apart entire cruisers. The sensors could not find the source of these attacks. For every human missile that was intercepted, another appeared from an unexpected angle, as if guided by an unseen hand. The Dominion commanders ordered a push toward the planet, determined to break through the human defense line. But as they approached Earth, something new happened. Every Dominion ship's systems began to fail. Lights dimmed, engines lost power, targeting systems went blind. The fleet slowed, as if trapped in invisible chains. Panic spread among the crews as they found themselves unable to fire or move. And then came the human counterattack. From the dark side of the moon, ships emerged that no Dominion scan had detected before. They were black and sharp like the edges of a knife, moving with impossible speed, their weapons silent flashes that cut through armor like paper. These human ships did not broadcast any signal. They did not open channels for surrender. They simply struck again and again until the space around the moon was filled with drifting wrecks. The survivors tried to retreat, but every path they took was blocked, every escape met with sudden destruction. In less than a single day, the might of the Dravic Dominion had been shattered. The humans did not pursue the fleeing ships. They simply returned to their silent positions, guarding their world, as if nothing had happened. When the survivors returned to Dominion space, the High Council demanded reports, demanded to know what weapon the humans had used. But the answers were confused and broken. Some spoke of strange signals that attacked their minds. Some swore they saw shadows moving inside their ships. Even when no breach had occurred, others refused to speak at all, their eyes empty, as if the battle had taken more than their bodies. The Dominion considered sending a second fleet, but the admirals warned against it. The losses had been too great, and the truth was they did not understand what had happened. The humans had shown no signs of the weapons they used, no evidence, no proof of their strength, only the undeniable fact that the greatest fleet in the galaxy had been destroyed in hours. And so the Dominion erased the records of the war from public view. They told their people it was a minor skirmish, nothing more. But in the deep rooms where the true rulers met, they whispered of the blue planet that had turned their victory into ashes. Across the galaxy, the story spread in fragments carried by traitors, mercenaries, and spies. No one knew the whole truth, but the pieces they heard were enough to plant seeds of fear. Some said the humans had a hidden fleet built from alien technology far beyond anything the Dominion had ever seen. Others claimed they were allied with an ancient race older than the stars themselves. Some even believed the humans were not truly human at all, but something wearing the skin of humans, something that had been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Whatever the truth was, no empire dared to test them again. The name of Earth was spoken with care and often avoided entirely. Maps began to mark the Sol system not as a target, but as a dead zone, a place where no traitor, no soldier, and no explorer should ever go. And in time, even the boldest warlords learned that there were many planets to conquer, many riches to claim, but only one world that would bring nothing but ruin to those foolish enough to challenge it. And so Earth remained alone, quiet and watchful, while the galaxy learned to fear without ever truly understanding why. Across the far reaches of the galaxy in markets, and in shadowed bars on worlds with skies of red and oceans of black, the whispers about Earth grew and spread like a storm without end, carried by the tongues of travelers who claimed to know someone who had seen the truth, though no one could prove they had been there. No one could show a piece of the mysterious technology or the body of a human soldier, yet the stories persisted, and each telling made the planet seem more dangerous, more impossible to challenge than before, and for every empire that dismissed these tales as superstition, there were twice as many that quietly shifted their fleets away from the Sol system, not willing to take the chance that the rumors might be true. In the spaceport tavern of Karen 3, a smuggler with eyes like cracked glass told a group of miners that he had once passed close to Earth's moon, his ship hidden by the shadow of a passing asteroid. He swore that the surface of the moon was not barren, but alive with hidden structures that moved like insects, and that strange lights pulsed in patterns too perfect to be random. He claimed these were sensors that could track any vessel across light years, and that once they locked onto a target, nothing could hide from them. The miners laughed, but there was a tightness in their faces, for even if the story was false, it felt too real to ignore. Far in the frozen markets of the Shanari Belt, an old merchant sold shards of black metal, saying they were pieces of a human warship. He told his buyers that the metal was unlike anything in the known galaxy, harder than the armor of Dominion dreadnoughts, and yet lighter than water, able to bend without breaking. Some believed him and paid in gold, some spat and called him a liar. But the shards were gone within the day, and those who bought them never spoke of it again. On the war world of Keth Prime, a retired general told his students of a strange signal he once intercepted during a border patrol. The signal was soft, almost like a whisper, but it carried with it a weight that made his crew feel ill. For days he traced the source to somewhere beyond the edge of known space in the direction of Sol. He never followed it, he said, because some things are better left untouched. These stories mixed with others until no one knew where one ended and another began. There were tales of humans able to fight for days without sleep, of soldiers who could vanish into thin air, of fleets that moved faster than light without leaving any energy signature. There were even darker tales of weapons that did not kill in the usual way, but instead erased entire minds, leaving bodies alive but empty. These tales were told in low voices for fear that speaking them too loud would draw the attention of whatever force protected Earth. The strangest, and perhaps the most feared rumor, came from the mouth of a dying pirate captain drifting in a crippled ship near the edge of Vorn space. He had been part of a raid on a convoy that they thought was unprotected, easy prey, but among the freighters there had been one ship unlike the others, small, black, and unmarked. It had no visible weapons, and yet when it turned its strange flat nose toward the pirates, their ships began to shut down one by one. Without any attack, the systems simply died, and the crews fell silent in their chairs, eyes open but empty. The captain had escaped only because his ship was at the very edge of the formation. He drifted for weeks before being found, and in those weeks he swore he heard voices in the static calling his name in languages he did not know. When asked what the voices said, he only replied, "They told me to tell the galaxy to stay away." For every tale that painted the humans as warriors, there were others that suggested they were something else entirely. Some said Earth was not the original home of humanity, but a fortress world built to protect something ancient, something hidden deep beneath its oceans or buried under its mountains. Some even whispered that humans were the descendants of the first race to ever travel the stars, and that their return to power was not conquest, but the reclaiming of what was once theirs. Among the star empires, these rumors caused arguments and fear. Some leaders wanted to test the truth, sending scouts and spies to gather real information, but the few who tried either never returned or came back changed, silent and cold, refusing to speak about what they had seen. One report from a scout ship that did manage to transmit a message before disappearing contained only 4 words: "They are not what they seem," and after that the signal went dead. On neutral worlds where merchants and warriors gathered, the name of Earth became a kind of curse, a word you did not say unless you were ready for trouble. Those who spoke it too much found their fortunes turning sour, their ships breaking down, their deals falling apart. It was as if the very idea of challenging the humans brought bad luck, or perhaps something far worse. The superstitious began to believe that Earth could somehow hear its name spoken across the stars, and that it remembered those who spoke it in anger. Back aboard the small cargo ship where Laro traveled with a crew, he found himself thinking of these stories more and more. He remembered the way Dren had looked at him when he asked about Earth, the weight in his voice. When he spoke of those who never returned, Laro began to wonder if the galaxy's fear was not only about power or weapons, but about something deeper, something in the humans themselves, something that could not be measured on a scanner or stopped by a shield. Perhaps the reason no Empire dared to challenge Earth was because on some level they all knew that if they did, they would not only lose the battle, they would lose something of themselves, something they could never get back. As the ship drifted toward its next port, Laro sat by the narrow window staring at the far distant stars and wondering if somewhere out there a human ship was watching them, unseen, silent, and patient. And he thought of all the tales he had heard in the short time since he had first asked that forbidden question. The stories were all different, yet they all agreed on one thing: Earth was not a place to invade, not a place to conquer, it was a place to leave alone. For those who ignored that warning, never returned to tell their tale, and perhaps that was the most powerful weapon of all, the weapon of fear, sharpened not by war, but by mystery and the unknown. In the long stretch of years after the war that had shattered the Dravid Dominion, a strange pattern began to emerge in the movements of fleets and traders across the stars. For while the galaxy was still full of battles and raids and the endless struggle for power, there was one place, one small bright corner of the night sky that seemed to remain untouched by all of it, and that place was the Sol system. No matter how far empires expanded, no matter how many worlds they took, there was always an invisible line around Earth and its planets, a line no one crossed, not even by accident. It began with the big powers, those who had the strength to take what they wanted from any other world. They would plan campaigns that drew lines through space on the maps in their war rooms, and always there was a gap, a missing section where the Sol system should have been. Fleets would set out toward that region of space only to turn away, without a fight, sometimes without even sending a signal home. The official reasons varied: navigational errors, sudden changes in orders, claims of technical failures, but everyone knew the truth even if they did not say it. Earth had made its warning without speaking, and the galaxy had heard. On the trade routes, whispers moved like shadows, telling of ships that had approached the outer edges of the system only to vanish without a trace. The merchant guilds kept quiet about these losses for fear of causing panic, but among the captains the rule was simple: you could fly anywhere in the galaxy so long as you stayed far from the human star. Some claimed that even passing too close to the invisible border could draw their attention, and once they noticed you, there was no way to escape. One tale that spread quickly was of a convoy belonging to the Vorsk Combine, a vast and greedy merchant empire that cared little for the fears of others. The convoy had been carrying rare metals from the asteroid mines of Kithar back to the Combine homeworld, and their charted course took them near the Sol border. The Combine leaders laughed at the warnings, calling them old stories meant to frighten children. They ordered their ships to continue as planned. The convoy entered the Forbidden Zone on a bright morning according to their time, and before the day was done, not one of them had returned. Weeks later, a single freighter from that group drifted into a busy port, its hull scarred and its engines dead. The boarding crew found no one inside, not dead, not alive, simply gone, as if they had stepped out of the universe. The military powers were no braver than the merchants. The warlords of the Galactic Dominion once considered testing Earth's defenses by sending a small fleet into the system to see what would happen, but the fleet never launched. On the morning of the mission, the warlord himself was found in his command chamber staring at nothing, his face pale and his hands shaking. He would not speak for 3 days, and when he finally did, his words were simple: "The humans are watching us." From that day forward, the Kelak marked the Sol system as a no-travel zone on every map. Even the pirates, known for their boldness and disregard for law, avoided that sector of space. Many claimed it was because there was nothing there worth stealing, but the truth was whispered in back rooms among the oldest and most ruthless raiders. They said they had heard a voice in the static when their ships came too close, a voice that spoke in every language at once, telling them to turn back before it was too late. Those who ignored it were never heard from again. In time, the fear became so deep that it no longer needed to be spoken. New navigators learned the shape of the galaxy, with the Sol system as a blank space to be circled around like a dangerous current in a deep sea. They did not ask why, and their captains did not tell them. The old powers understood that the humans did not need to fight or threaten, or even appear. Their silence was enough. The galaxy had seen what they could do, and that memory was a wall higher than any fortress. On neutral worlds, the scholars and historians sometimes debated the question of why Earth had chosen this path of quiet instead of spreading its power across the stars, as so many others had. Some argued that it was because humans were not interested in ruling over others, that they preferred to protect their own world and leave the rest alone. Others believed it was a tactic, that their restraint made them seem even more dangerous, for an enemy who did not need to fight was an enemy who could not be predicted. Laro, aboard the small cargo ship, found these thoughts returning to him again and again as the weeks passed through ports and markets. He overheard the quiet conversations, the names left unsaid, the way maps had empty spaces where the Sol system should be. He began to notice how even the bravest captains would check their position twice when traveling near that part of the galaxy. He wondered if the humans themselves ever thought about the fear they had built, if they knew how powerful it was, or if they simply lived their lives under the blue skies of their home, unaware of the vast silence that surrounded them. Yet the more he heard, the more he felt that this silence was not an accident. There was a sense of purpose to it, as if every missing ship, every turned-away fleet, every vanishing voice was part of a pattern, one that only the humans understood. He thought of the way Dren had warned him that those who challenged Earth never returned, and he began to believe that perhaps this was not just because of weapons or technology. Perhaps it was something deeper, something built into the very heart of the planet and its people, something that reached out into the dark and made the rest of the galaxy turn away. By the time the cargo ship reached its next destination, Laro had stopped asking questions. He had learned the unspoken rule that ran through every story, every whisper, every silence. Earth was not to be challenged, not to be crossed, and not to be approached without a reason strong enough to risk everything. And in all the galaxy, no such reason seemed to exist. For those who came too close were met with nothing at all, no warning, no battle, no words, just the endless quiet of the void and whatever waited within it. There are moments in the history of the galaxy that never make it into the official records, moments spoken of only in whispers among those who were there, and one such moment was the story of the spy ship that went to look upon Earth and sent back a message that froze the blood of every leader who read it. The ship belonged to the Varen Directorate, a people known for their cunning and their skill in gathering secrets. Their agents had stolen plans from warlords, infiltrated the courts of emperors, and uncovered weapons hidden for centuries. They had never failed to get the truth until they sent the Silent Eye toward the Sol system. The Silent Eye was small, sleek, and built to avoid notice, its hull coated in black matter that absorbed nearly all light. Its engines whisper quiet in the void, its crew handpicked for their discipline and their ability to remain calm no matter what they saw. The mission was simple: to approach Earth without being detected and gather as much visual and energy data as possible to map its defenses, to confirm or deny the endless rumors that surrounded it. The Directorate believed that if anyone could find the truth, it was the crew of the Silent Eye. They entered the Sol system at the edge of the Oort cloud, far beyond the reach of any human patrols. At least according to the calculations, they drifted for days using passive scans, their instruments drinking in the faint light of the sun and the invisible pulses of energy that filled the empty dark. Everything seemed quiet, almost too quiet, and the captain, a woman named Sereth, began to feel a weight in her chest, a sensation she could not explain, as if unseen eyes were already upon them. As they moved closer, passing the orbit of the gas giant Neptune, their long-range sensors began to pick up anomalies, small bursts of energy in patterns that did not match any known natural phenomenon. Sereth ordered the crew to focus on the readings, but every time they thought they had locked onto the source, it would vanish, leaving only empty space behind. The navigator reported that their instruments were recording faint gravitational shifts, like the passing of massive objects, but there was nothing to see, nothing at all. The crew grew uneasy, though they said nothing. They were trained to endure the strangest missions, but there was something about this silence that pressed in from all sides. Sereth decided to continue the mission. They moved in closer to Uranus, and then to Saturn, its great rings casting long shadows across the cold vacuum, and still there was no sign of human ships, no stations, no weapon platforms, only the faint invisible signals that came and went like a heartbeat in the dark. When they passed the orbit of Mars, the first signs of life began to appear. Small craft moved between stations and moons, their drives weak, their designs crude compared to the advanced technology of the Varen Directorate. Sereth almost laughed, thinking that perhaps the rumors had been nothing but stories told by frightened merchants. Yet, even as she thought it, the uneasy weight in her chest grew heavier, and she found her eyes drawn again and again to the black emptiness beyond the ships, as if waiting for something to emerge. Finally, they approached Earth, the blue and white world turning slowly in the blackness. The sight of it was strangely beautiful, and for a moment the crew forgot their mission, simply staring at the clouds drifting over green and brown continents, the oceans glittering in the sunlight. Sareth ordered the scanners to full power. She wanted every detail of the planet recorded, every energy reading, every transmission. But the moment the scans began, something happened. Every system on the Silent Eye flickered, the lights dimmed, the engines stalled, the screens went black. For a breathless moment, the ship floated powerless in the void. Then the systems came back online all at once, with a single short message on the central display. They are not what they seem. There was no signature, no source, no encryption, just those 6 words burning on the screen. The crew stared in silence, and Sareth felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She ordered the message stored and sent to the Directorate immediately. As the signal left the ship, every alarm in the control room began to sound at once. The whole sensors detected massive objects surrounding them, but there was still nothing to see. The gravitational readings spiked, the energy field surged, and one by one the crew began to collapse, not screaming, not struggling, just falling into their seats, their eyes wide and unfocused, their breathing slow, as if they were asleep with their eyes open. Sareth was the last to fall, her hands gripping the edge of the console, her vision blurring in the dim light. She thought she saw shapes moving outside the ship, vast and silent, like shadows given form. She wanted to call out to them to ask what they were, but her voice would not come, and then there was only darkness. Weeks later, a patrol ship from a neutral trading world found the Silent Eye drifting far from the Sol border. The ship's systems were dead, but the hull was untouched. When they boarded, they found no one inside. The crew had vanished entirely. Every room was empty, every suit was still sealed, as if the crew had simply walked out into space without opening the airlocks. The only sign that anyone had ever been there was the single recorded message still stored in the core: they are not what they seem. The patrol ship transmitted the file to the Directorate and then destroyed the Silent Eye at the request of its own crew. They said the ship felt wrong, as if it were still being watched. The message caused chaos in the Directorate. Some argued that it was proof of human deception, that the quiet planet hid a far greater power than anyone imagined. Others said it was a warning meant to keep outsiders away, a kind of psychological weapon. The Director himself, the ruler of the Varen, listened to the arguments in silence and then ordered that all operations involving Earth be stopped at once. No spy ships, no scouts, no listening posts. The risk, he said, was unacceptable. From that day, the story of the Silent Eye spread through the galaxy, not through official channels, but through the whispers of those who had read the report and could not forget it. Some embellished it, saying the crew had been taken and replaced. Others claimed the shapes in the dark were human ships too advanced to be seen with normal light. Still others insisted the crew had never existed at all, that the Silent Eye had been sent into nothingness and returned with something else, something wearing its shape. Back on the cargo ship, Laro heard the story from a drunken merchant who claimed to have seen the original message file. He repeated the words with a shiver: they are not what they seem, and Laro felt the truth in them. Whatever the humans were, whatever their planet hid, it was more than weapons, more than soldiers. It was something the galaxy could not understand, and that was why no one dared to challenge them. For how can you fight what you cannot see, what you cannot know, what you cannot even name? In the years after the Silent Eye vanished, a strange calm settled over the Sol border. For a time, no one dared to approach. No merchant, no pirate, no soldier. The memory of the missing spy ship was enough to keep even the most reckless captains away. But history has always been shaped by those who think themselves exceptions, by leaders who believe the rules of fear and caution do not apply to them. And so it was that the name of the warlord Kargan began to rise in the talk of the galaxy. Kargan came from the shattered worlds of the Torcan Reach, a warrior race scattered and broken by centuries of defeat. His rise had been swift, his voice loud, his fleets growing larger with every conquest. He was a figure made for war, tall, broad, his armor blackened from battles, his eyes cold, and sure. He promised his people not only power, but revenge on every empire that had ever ignored or insulted them, and for a time it seemed he could do no wrong. System after system fell before him, until the Reach banners hung over 100 new worlds, but as his victories grew, so did his ambition, and in the heat of his pride, he made a promise: he would conquer Earth, and by doing so, he would erase the fear that kept the galaxy in chains. The announcement came not in whispers, but in a grand broadcast sent across the void to every major world. The warlord stood before his fleet, a sea of steel and fire. He named Earth a coward world hiding behind myth and rumor. He swore to burn away the lies and show the galaxy the truth. He set the date for his departure, and every media network, every intelligence agency, every rival warlord watched with fascination and dread, for no one had openly threatened Earth in living memory. On the day of the launch, the fleet stood ready in orbit around Kargan's throne world, 1,000 ships armed with weapons to crack moons, armored against every known attack. The crews were eager, the war chants loud, the engines bright against the darkness. The countdown began. The galaxy held its breath, but when the moment came, nothing happened. No engines roared, no ships moved. The fleet remained still and silent. The comm channels were dead, the war chants gone. The countdown clocks stopped mid-number. For hours, the watching worlds waited, confusion turning to unease, then to fear. Finally, a small scout craft from Kargan's own inner guard was sent to approach the command ship. It docked without resistance, but when the boarding teams entered, they found only emptiness. The corridors echoed with their own footsteps. The command bridge was abandoned. The great chair where Kargan had sat was vacant, every console active, every weapon primed, but no one was there. The same was true for every ship in the fleet. The crews gone, as if they had simply stepped away from reality, leaving behind nothing but cold metal. The scout craft returned with this news, and the story spread faster than light. Some claimed it was a betrayal from within, that Kargan's own people had turned on him. Others believed the humans had acted before the fleet ever left, striking in some way that left no mark, no sign, but removed every living being in an instant. The more superstitious said Kargan had spoken Earth's name too often and too loudly, and the planet had heard him and answered in its own silent way. The Torkin Reach fell into chaos. Without its leader, the conquests undone, the banners torn down, the fleets divided among would-be successors, none of whom dared to mention Earth again. In public, the warlord's disappearance became a warning, a new tale to add to the growing list of reasons not to test the humans in the drinking dens of the frontier. The story took on a darker edge. They said Kargan had not been destroyed, but taken, that somewhere in the black between the stars he and his fleet still drifted, alive but frozen, unable to move, their minds trapped in endless dreams shaped by human hands. In the private halls of the great powers, the reaction was quieter, but no less serious. The images from the empty ships were studied in silence, the sensor logs examined, every line of code, every particle of energy measured, and still there was nothing, no sign of battle, no sign of entry, no sign of what had happened. The conclusion was unspoken, but understood. Earth's power was not limited by range or distance. It could reach into the heart of a fleet before it ever crossed the invisible border. It could remove a threat without firing a single shot, and it could do so in a way that left nothing to explain or to fight against. Laro heard this story in fragments over weeks in different ports, each telling, adding something new. In one version, Kargan had sent a last desperate transmission saying only they are here before his voice faded. In another, the fleet had been seen days later, far from the Reach, flying in perfect formation toward an unknown point in the void with no signals and no life signs. In the strangest version, the ships had been found again years later on the far edge of the galaxy, their hulls overgrown with some black crystal, their engines fused, their bridges empty and cold. Whatever the truth was, it added to the unshakable image of Earth as a force that could not be challenged, not because of what it had done in open battle, but because of what it could do without ever showing its face. The galaxy's fear deepened, and with it the silence around the Sol system grew thicker. Maps no longer marked its exact location. The name Earth vanished from official lists of inhabited worlds, but in the shadows and in the quiet places it was still spoken, and always with caution. Aboard the cargo ship, Laro began to feel the weight of these stories settling into him. He had started his journey thinking of Earth as just another world far away. Now it had become something else entirely, not a place on a map, but a presence that reached across the stars unseen and unstoppable. The idea that a warlord as bold and as powerful as Kargan could simply vanish without a sound made him realize that perhaps the humans did not just protect their world, they shaped the space around it in ways no one could understand. He wondered if, even now as he sat in the mess hall hearing the hum of the ship's engines, there was a human ship watching from some hidden place, silent and patient, ready to act if needed. The crew said nothing about it, but he could see in their eyes the same thought, and in that unspoken understanding, Lero finally grasped the truth that the galaxy had learned through fear and loss. Earth did not need to fight to win, it only needed to be. The cargo ship was 4 days from its last delivery run when the call came in a coded burst from a relay station on the edge of a dead sector. The captain read it in silence, his brow tight, his fingers tapping the side of the console, as if thinking through something heavy. Then he turned to the crew and ordered a change of course. Without explanation, the shift in direction was small, but enough to take them off the main trade lanes and into a stretch of dark space where no one traveled without a reason. The crew did not ask questions, they worked in quiet. Even the younger ones, who usually whisper during duty hours, kept their voices low. Lero noticed this and felt the air grow thicker with each passing hour as the stars outside grew fewer and the shadows seemed to press closer. By the third day of the detour, Lero could no longer hold back his curiosity. He asked the captain where they were going and why. The older man did not answer at first, but after a long pause he said, "Only we are going to meet someone," and left it at that. The words sent a strange shiver through Lero, though he could not say why. The next morning they dropped out of faster-than-light travel near a small moon that circled a gas giant, its surface cracked and gray, its thin atmosphere barely enough to stir the dust. The sensors showed nothing alive, no ships, no stations, just the dead rock hanging in the dark. But as they drifted closer, a small object appeared on the edge of the display, a single vessel resting on the surface. It was unlike any ship Lero had ever seen, small and plain, its hull a dull silver, without markings, no weapons, no visible engines, its shape simple, almost primitive, and yet something about it made his chest tighten. The captain ordered the cargo ship to set down a short walk away from the silver vessel. When the landing ramp lowered, the air outside was thin and cold, but breathable. The crew stepped out, their boots crunching on the dry dust, and made their way toward the waiting ship. No one spoke, no one needed to. Lero followed at the back, his heart beating hard. A single figure stood by the silver vessel, tall, wrapped in a long coat, the hood pulled low so the face was hidden. The captain walked ahead and stopped a few paces away. The two stood in silence for a long time before the hooded figure finally spoke. The voice was calm, quiet, but carried easily in the still air. It said, "You brought the one." The captain nodded and stepped aside, his eyes flicking to Lero. In that moment the young deckhand understood they were speaking about him. The figure turned toward him, and Lero felt the weight of that unseen gaze. It was not hostile, not warm, but something deeper, as if this person was looking not at him, but through him. The figure said, "You have been asking questions about Earth." The words were not a question, yet Lero felt compelled to answer. He nodded and said yes. The hooded head tilted slightly, as if studying him. Then the voice spoke again. "What you have heard are pieces, shadows of a truth that is older and larger than the maps you know. No empire dares to challenge Earth because the humans do not fight for territory or for pride. They fight only when there is no other choice, and when that choice is made, they fight in a way that changes everything." Lero wanted to ask what that meant, but the figure continued. "Long before the first empires rose, long before the first starships sailed, humans were already surviving in a place that would have destroyed any other kind. Storms, ice, heat, hunger, disease, endless war with each other, and yet they endured. They grew stronger, each trial shaping them not just in body, but in mind and spirit. When they reached the stars, they carried that with them, a will that does not bend, a memory of survival that does not fade. The first time an empire tried to break them, they won, not because they had more ships or better weapons, but because they refused to accept defeat no matter the cost." The figure stepped closer, the coat moving slightly in the thin wind. "There are many stories about weapons hidden on Earth, some true, some not, but the greatest weapon humans have is themselves. They will sacrifice everything, even their own world, if it means the enemy will not win. That is why no one challenges them twice. That is why fleets vanish and leaders disappear, not because of tricks or machines, but because the humans make a promise in war and they always keep it." Lero felt the words sink into him, and for a moment he imagined what it would be like to face such people, to know that no matter what you did, they would keep coming until you were gone. The figure said, "There is one more thing you must know. The humans do not seek fear. They do not want the galaxy to tremble, but they have learned that fear is the shield that keeps the war from reaching their home. So they let the stories grow. They let the darkness around soul remain because it keeps the peace better than any treaty." The wind stirred again, carrying the fine dust across the ground. The figure reached up and pulled back the hood, revealing a human face lined with years and hard roads. The eyes were sharp and steady, and Lero felt as if the whole weight of the galaxy was behind them. The human said, "One day someone will forget the stories or think themselves stronger, and they will come. When that day comes, the galaxy will remember again why no one dares to challenge Earth. Without another word, the human turned and walked up the ramp of the silver vessel. It rose silently into the dark sky, without flame or sound, and was gone. The crew returned to their ship still. Without speaking, the captain gave the order to leave the moon, and they rose back into the endless night. As the cargo ship drifted away, Laro stood at the small window in his cabin watching the distant stars. He knew now that the truth of Earth was not in the weapons or in the fleets, but in the people, and that truth was more dangerous than anything he had ever imagined. He also knew that he would carry this knowledge for the rest of his life, and that he would never speak of it except in whispers, for some truths were not meant to be shouted into the void. And somewhere far behind them in the silent darkness, he thought he could almost feel the unseen eyes of Earth still watching, patient and unblinking, waiting for the day when the galaxy would once again need to be reminded of the promise the humans had made long ago, a promise written not in words, but in the unbreakable will of their kind.